I sing Jai Radha Madhava. I remember when I first went to Mumbai. This was in March of 1971. And Prabhupada would sing this in the morning, and I hadn't heard it before. So I remember back to that first time when I heard that a couple of years ago. And so I think of that it's ever fresh to hear Prabhupada singing it. Because it's different when someone is singing it. Just like if I was to tell you about cricket. Okay, I'll give my discourse on cricket. Cricket is a sport. It has 11 players. They use a bat. They hit a ball, and they have something called a wicket. And Sachin Tendulkar is the best player. Okay, that's my extent of knowledge, right? Now, if Sachin Tendulkar was going to give it, he has some realized knowledge about this. So this is the difference when someone like Srila Prabhupada is singing, is that he's not just singing an idea. Like when I'm talking about cricket, do you know what a wicket looks like? Does anyone know? Good, because I don't. I know it's called a wicket. I'm not sure what they do with it. But Sachin Tendulkar would know. So the same way, when Prabhupada is singing to Krishna, he's not just singing about Krishna, he's singing to Krishna. Krishna is right there with him. And this is the experience you get. This is why people asked us why we came to Prabhupada when we were born in some other religion. I said, well, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Tat Vidipani Prashnena Pariprashnena Sevaya Upadekshanti Te Gyanam Gyananivas Tat Vadarshanaha, that one should approach the self-realized spiritual master, inquire from him submissively, and does it ask favors from him? No, it's render service to him. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge to you. Why? He's seen the truth. Makes a difference when someone has seen it, right? And they're telling you about it. Like I can tell you about Laguna Beach because I've been there. But this is different. Prabhupada is in direct contact with Krishna. So we could feel this. And this went out. You know, just like the drum beats a block and the Brihamadanga goes around the world, you find that the vibration of Prabhupada can be carried very far and wide. We see that Prabhupada affected so many people. And we'll see this how I started in my life. As I went to, in 1967, there was a big music festival at the Orange County Fairgrounds. And at this, there was one group in Laguna Beach, the Mystic Arts World. They had a store where they sold health food, and they sold incense things and books on different spiritual things. And so they were, at the end of they had the health food section. Other people sold Coca-Cola, hot dogs, whatever else. And they got together and singing. One of my friends, he was a big guy, but his name was Tiny. And I said, what's that song they're singing? He says, well, there's a temple on Pico Boulevard, and there's a Swami that sang this song, and his name is Prabhupada. And the song goes like this: Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So Prabhupada was not there at this music festival. There weren't any other devotees there. But people had heard Prabhupada sing this, and they sang that, and I sang this song to God with them. And they sang for like an hour, and all these people gathered around. So the seed had been planted in them, and they planted it in me. So we see, as Krishna says, the idea, what we try to do for ourselves is that if we take one step to Krishna, he takes 10 to us. And if we take one to Prabhupada, he takes 10 to us. It's just like if I'm telling you, whatever money you give me, I will give you 10 times. If you give me 100 rupees, I will give you 1,000 rupees. Should you get me 100 rupees? No, you should get me 100 million rupees and get 1 billion, right? If you're getting 10 to 1, you don't give a little, right? You give a lot. So at this, I didn't know much. I was just a child, but I sang this with them. And we see how Krishna arranged things through Srila Prabhupada. Is that a couple of days later, a friend of mine was shooting at animals. And the dove, I don't know what you call the dove. It's not the kabutar, but it looks, the dove, the two of them always go together, look a little similar. I don't know the name in Hindi for it. But it's the bird of peace. And my friend squished one with a rock. And this was 1967. And I said, that's a cruel thing to do. He said, well, you eat meat, don't you? I said, yes. He said, how many animals do they have to kill for you to eat meat? I said, probably a lot. He said, so does it make me any worse to kill one more bird than for you to eat all those animals? I said, you're right. He said, so it's okay for me to kill the bird? I said, no, I'll never eat meat again. I went home and told my mother. She says, okay. A couple years ago when I told him that, I said, remember 1967? Which is more than a couple years ago, isn't it? So I said, remember when that happened? He was expecting me to justify his killing the animal, but, oh, can we turn the cell phones off? Because it's hard to keep one train of thought when the birds or whatever is singing there on the phones, right? If anybody has a cell phone, please turn it off or throw it out the window or something. So where was I? Okay, so yes. See, it just shows that when you take a little step to Krishna, he arranges things to happen. You know, things that we don't see. You know, sometimes people can arrange things and you don't see it going on. I told one person that was a friend of mine, I told her, this was years ago, she had like a thing on her baby that was supposed to be a mouse, and I said, oh, those are nice rabbit ears. She goes, those are mouse ears. I said, nobody will think that. So I told 3 people, I said, tell her those are nice rabbit ears. She goes, oh, those are nice rabbit ears. She says, why does everyone think it's a rabbit? And then I said, I had a couple people tell her, are you okay? You look a little tired. She says, people think I look tired. I said, well, go throw some water on your face, and maybe it'll be better, right? So when she came back, I told someone to say, oh, you look refreshed. You doing so? She goes, it worked. And then I told her later, guess what? I arranged that. So Krishna arranges things behind the scenes, just so we don't see it, right? Just like if there's a surprise party, just because you don't see them arranging the surprise, you open the door, big surprise, doesn't mean it's not going on. So Krishna arranges the things according to our desire. They say, be careful what you wish for, you might get it. Yes? Right? There was on a commercial on the TV, I didn't see it, it was in Australia. But the person was saying, please, I wish that I could be rich, cool, rich, and irresistible to women. And he's turned into a chocolate cookie in the refrigerator. And his girlfriend comes home and says, Tim, where are you? She goes in the refrigerator and goes, oh, wow, these are irresistible, and eats them, right? So, like that, fortunately, if we can just desire the right thing once, right? Just enough of it once. And that's what happened, that Prabhupada chanted. These people heard it, I heard it, and because of that, Krishna arranged for me to set the ground by being vegetarian isn't all of it, but it sure helps in that. So then in my travels, I spent time with the people at Mystic Arts, and the devotees would come in there to chant, and they'd influenced the people there. And the people there I knew at the store would say, someday for spiritual life, not Sunday, but someday we have to give up illicit sex and intoxication. Now some people think, well, if you can't give it up, then forget about it, right? But sometimes if you're just willing to, right? Prabhupada says in Bhagavad Gita, if we're not against the principle of surrender, if we're not envious for thinking, well, I can't surrender completely now. It's like we tell people, you don't have to surrender completely. In the beginning, you just come to a temple. Prabhupada said in the beginning, he didn't introduce the regulative principles, he just introduced the chanting. Just make friends with people. It depends where someone's at. Just get them to get started. You know, Prabhupada made so many brilliant statements. And when people are going off on some tangent of some difficult thing, I say, yes, Prabhupada said we should go in like a plow and out like a needle. Is that right? No. So I said, that's right. Then do it the right way. You see you see how bad it is when you go in like a plow and out like a needle? You say, oh, we never went to the moon. Then okay, so what if we did or didn't? That's a difficult point to prove. And it has not much benefit on the other side. Vaisheshika says to people, have you heard about stress? What do? Get a dictionary out, or do they say yes? He said, would you like to be free of stress? Do they say no? You start with something easy. and worked from there, right? So Prabhupada started with the chanting, started with the prasadam, got people interested. So they would say, someday for real spiritual life, we have to give up illicit sex and intoxication. And this was the 60s. We had beer and marijuana and girls and whatever else you did in high school. So in the bookstore in this mystic arts world, some of my friends would say, can you watch it for 5 minutes? But the 5 minutes, it's funny how time is. Like when a lawyer bills for a billable hour, it's somewhere between 20 and 50 minutes. But when they told me 5 minutes, it was more like something between 12 and 30, right? So I found this one book I started reading. It was called Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. And this book said that bhakti means that you just ask God to serve him. Ask for some way to serve him. You don't ask for a bunch of favors in return. So I thought, this sounds good. So I had my special meditation rock. And I would go to this during high school, and I would pray for some way to find love of God. And I was doing this in like 1969. And then on January 5th, 1970, I went to this rock, and I was praying, okay, God, send me some way to develop love for you. All of a sudden, I got this real strong inspiration. Like my friends had told me, who had heard from devotees, who had heard from Prabhupada, right? I'm like, Prabhupada is first, the devotees second, these people third. I was the fourth down in the chain, but it stuck. And I had this strong inspiration. If I want real spiritual life, I have to give up illicit sex and intoxication. So I thought, you know what, this is a good idea. What I'll do is I'll do it, this is January, I'll do it in summer when high school's over, right? It's like St. Augustine said, God, please make me chaste to you. Just don't do it today, right? Right? That's what they think, right? But it's better than not thinking it at all, right? Because sometimes then the ways and means will come. And sometimes you want something so bad materially, and Krishna gives it to you in such a way that you never ask for it again. You're laughing, that means it didn't happen to you. Okay, we'll go back to that. So I got the strong inspiration, and I thought, you know what, I should try to date a couple more girls, have a couple more parties, and then give these things up in June. And I thought, well, you know, if it's not good, I shouldn't do it. And if it is good, I might as well do it. I said, all right, God, I'll give up illicit sex and intoxication, and you send me some way to develop love for you. And I'm sitting on my rock, and I thought, how long will this take? Will it take a week, a month, a year? And I opened my eyes, and as far away as the gentleman here in the blue kurta is a devotee in saffron walking towards me. And I thought, Hare Krishna? You know, as I took, I guess that was more than one step for a high school kid, right? Without knowing anything. So Krishna arranged it right away. I guess the circumstances were coming quick, like the devotees were, he came up and I said, what brought you here? He says, we were up on the hill chanting, and all of a sudden I felt this uncontrollable compulsion to come down to the beach. And, you know, you see they're calling, like there's one person here, Rakesh, when they call, Rakesh, Rakesh, he always comes, right? But if you think, why didn't Rakesh come? Did you call him? No, I didn't forgot to call him. So if we don't call Krishna, he may not come, even if he's there. So he said, we were up on the hill chanting, and I had this uncontrollable compulsion to come down to the beach. He said, would you like to come up the hill and chant with us? I said, I think that's exactly what I'm supposed to do. So that was my beginning to come into the temple. You see that Prabhupada had influenced devotees who'd influenced people who influenced me, and that planted the seed. Plus the book was there for me to read, so I'm getting it from several angles. And so then the devotees showed up, and I started going to the temple. This is January of 1970. And very soon after that, what was neat when I got to the temple, this shows how that if we have old friends, we can help them out. And when I got to the temple, one of my friends, who's now Badri Narayan Swami, was already going to the temple. And I joke because he was going in 69, so I says, well, you joined in the 60s and I joined in the 70s. He says, yeah, but I came in 69, you came in 70. But it was nice to have him there, right? So what happened was they used to have the feast in Laguna at like 4 in the afternoon. But what they thought they would do is when Prabhupada came to LA, this was just about a month later, or I started coming January 5th. This was maybe very end of January, like 3 weeks later. They said, what we'll do is that we'll have a feast in Laguna at noon. And then we'll all get our cars and we'll drive to LA and we'll have a second feast with Srila Prabhupada. So this would be wonderful. So myself and Badri Narayan and a third person, we decided we'd stay at the temple on Saturday night, and we'd wake up in the morning and do the chanting with the devotees, and then we'd cut up the vegetables and help them do it and serve it out, and then tell everybody, get your cars, and we'd get ready to go. But what was funny was that one friend of ours named Jim Hill, it was funny, he was telling myself and Badri Narayan and somewhere else, he says, I go out to that Krishna temple, and I know all those devotees really well. And we thought, wow, that's great. Why don't you come on Sunday? He says, yeah, we'll come on Sunday. I'll introduce you to all of them. And he didn't know that when he got there and he saw Badri Narayan and I serving out prasadam and dressed in dhotis and the whole, he was like, it made me realize too that I shouldn't be embarrassed or feel bad if someone else came before me or knows more than I do. We're all in the same ship, going the same direction. Like Prabhupada says, the varnas aren't as important. If you get the first class ticket, second class, third class on the train, you're all going to get to the destination. That part isn't as important. And I never liked to think like that. I'm not shocked that other devotees come along who joined after me that are more advanced. I'd be threatened if they were more advanced in knife fighting and they're chasing me with one, right? But not if they're better devotees than I am. So we would, so the first time we did this, we finished up the feast and cleaned up and got everybody to get their cars. And we got in our cars and we went to LA. And at this time, the temple now is this was after the one in Pico, but before the one they have now on Watsika, it was on La Cienega Drive. So we drive to La Cienega and we'd stand out in front. At that time, many householders wore yellow. So there was like yellow and white and saffron and all these people have a big umbrella and they're chanting and people are driving by like skidding off the road watching all this, right? And then Srila Prabhupada came and you could just see like the glowing effulgence from Prabhupada, and Prabhupada got out and he went in the temple and he led the chanting first, and then he gave a class, and then he led the chanting for the arti. And then we had a second feast. And I said to someone, can I eat 2 feasts in a day? So you're still a growing boy, you can eat as much as you want. I was like 17. And so we did this through, this was like end of January, February, March. And in March they moved from La Cienega to the present temple on Watsika. And pretty soon after that, Prabhupada started giving classes on Monday instead of Sunday, or sometimes also Sunday. But we would like to go, when we could, we'd go for both feasts and see Prabhupada. But the second time I went, which was still at La Cienega, this was the initiation of Jayatirtha and Mohanananda. And I remember we would, when Prabhupada was leaving, everybody would line up for Prabhupada to touch them on the head as he was going by. And so there was no place for me, and so the car came here. So I knelt in the gutter next to the car. But when they came up, they opened the door like this. So the door was in front of me, and Prabhupada went past me. But then when the door shut, and Prabhupada saw me right there, Prabhupada's face is here, and I'm there. He says, oh, Hare Krishna. And he gets out and he touches me on the head. And immediately I felt, like the Nectar of Devotion says, that when you clap your hands in the kirtan, that it's like the birds fly out of the tree, the sinful desires. I felt relieved of all this karmic burden. I was chasing the car. And I remember the next day walking up to the high school, and I was chanting on beads and realizing that, just by Srila Prabhupada touching me on the head, that I felt so relieved of past karmic burdens. I mean, you could tell, just like we went back to the Tadvidi Prani Prashnena Bari Prashnena Sevaya Upadekshanti Tekanam Gnanivas Tattva Darshanaha, that because he's seen the truth. It's like with electricity. Just like we were talking, Prabhupada chanted to his devotees, the devotees chant it to the mystic arts world, they chant it to me, that the connection can become stronger as it goes, just like electricity. If one of you is getting the shock, and a second person grabs them, and I grab them, I even get a bigger shock. Each person down the line gets a bigger shock because it increases instead of decreases, right? It's not like, I think it was Ramakrishna said when he touched Vivekananda, he lost it, right? So if you have the shock and somebody touches you, you don't lose your shock. You all get the shock, right? So it's like that, but it's a spiritual shock. So I remember Prabhupada was describing at the La Cienega temple, he was saying that the modes of nature are like the 3 different colors, that yellow is the mode of goodness, and red is the mode of passion, and blue is the mode of ignorance. And then when you mix these colors together, you mix red and yellow, you get orange. You mix red and blue, you get purple. You mix blue and yellow, you get green. So by mixing, 3 times 3 is 9, and then you mix them again, 9 times 9 is 81. So these modes of nature are just like the colors. There's so many colors, but they come from a combination of those 3 colors. And it becomes very difficult to tell exactly what your mixture of modes is because of that. And Prabhupada's lectures were always so enlightening. And one time we went on Gaur Purnima 1970, and Prabhupada said, if you boys and girls are sincere, you will take over this country with this movement. Then he said, no, you boys and girls will take over this country with this movement. So when I saw Srila Prabhupada, it was always, I knew this was my spiritual master. I knew this was the enlightened person who was going to guide me and had the mission to follow. And we felt inspired by Prabhupada, not just mentally or emotionally, but spiritually. It was like getting that shock. You don't have to ask you just get it, right? It's like sticking the fork in the wall. You stick a fork in the wall, you feel the electricity, right? Don't try this. Did Srila Prabhupada ever try that? Did he? He did as a child. He stuck a fork in the wall. But when you follow the spiritual master, don't try that one, especially in India where 220 is twice as strong as America. So don't try that with the fork in the wall. But it's just like that. If you put that fork in the wall, do you say, I don't believe in electricity anymore? Or do you believe for sure? You do believe, right? So the same way when we contact Prabhupada, it's like, you contact someone else, it's like the light. You see something, or a fan, you feel something. But when you stick the fork in the wall, you see, feel, hear to an extreme degree. You really know electricity then. So that's what it was like with Prabhupada, really knowing Krishna consciousness because he had it in him. And so we would feel that. And so we were inspired even during high school. And what was amazing was myself and Badri and Ryan were in one class. There was 14 people in the humanities class, and 11 of them were vegetarians. So we would discuss different philosophies and different spiritual things. So the one time the teacher said, why don't we go to the Hare Krishna temple in LA and hear Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada speak, and then the next week we will discuss that as our topic. So many of the people went along, and my mother also went, and one of her old friends, a businessman, went along. It's funny, he paid his obeisances to Prabhupada, and he got up and Prabhupada was waiting for him, and Prabhupada grabbed his hand and he said, well, did you see that? He was so excited, he could tell that had happened. My mother talks on it. There's a, if I don't have one, I can get one from Gargamuni. He has a DVD of my mother talking about her experiences with Prabhupada, and we'll talk about that in a little bit here. That was, she saw Prabhupada at that time too. I'd already been other times. But the whole week during the class, we talked about it. And Prabhupada said Laguna Beach would be the first Krishna conscious town, that just like our body has chakras, one of them's in Laguna Beach. And you see that during that time, 1/3 of the high school was vegetarian, and many people became interested there. And some people are very conservative there, but many people are, Hare Krishna, many people are at least very interested in something and very open to it. That's why we have a temple in such a small town that so many people have joined that and so many people come to. It's only a town of 20,000 people, but 250 come for the Sunday feast. and we have a Panchatattva deities there. But at the time, we just had a painting of Panchatattva. And we would have the little temple was on Woodland Drive where all the hippie activity went on. So lots of people would come to the temple there. And so during high school, I'd go to the temple there and I would chant 16 rounds, and we'd go to see Prabhupada when he spoke in LA. And I remember before in the LA temple, if anyone's seen it now, the temple room, the temple room used to be where the museum was, and there were pews in there, and Prabhupada would stand and speak at the pulpit like the Christian church. He would speak at that. And I remember him saying that we must take to this Krishna consciousness right away. We've been through many, many lifetimes. So what happened was the end of summer, the end of school was coming, and I was supposed to go with my family to Europe on a trip, and I really just wanted to stay and join the LA temple. And my parents says, well, come to Europe, and then you can come back later. So I went to Europe with my family, and we landed in Amsterdam. We traveled to different places, and I had this vivid dream that Srila Prabhupada came to my high school, and he was speaking about, you've been through many births, let me show you some of them. And then he says, now it is time for you to take Krishna consciousness very seriously. He said, your parents want you to go to Hawaii and to Holland. He says, you can go to Hawaii, but don't go to Holland. Somehow or other, don't go there. So when I woke up, I realized that if I went back with my parents, I'd have to go through Holland. And I thought the dream was so vivid. I thought, let me figure out something. Maybe I'll go back to America early, or I'll stay at a temple here. So what happened was we were traveling there, and I remember we would, in some places we'd get baked potatoes and things, but we got to France, which wasn't the biggest vegetarian country. So in the family, we took the boat down the Seine River, and there was a menu of all these things, turkey this, beef that, and I'm thinking, there was nothing vegetarian. And then I saw the one, and it said half a melon. So I ordered half a melon, and it came with a piece of ham in it. So I was so depressed. I couldn't eat. They said, well, just take it out. I said, no, not like that. I can't eat it with a ham spin in it. So then my family went into a restaurant called La Coupole, and I thought, this is the Latin district. I bet the devotees are somewhere near here. So I said, I'm going to go and look for it. So I'm going up the different streets looking to see if there was a temple around. We didn't have internet in 1970. And I said, please, Prabhupada, give me some way to serve you. Please. All of a sudden, here's ting, ting, ting. And I go back, and sure enough, right in front of that restaurant, La Coupole, there's devotees chanting. There's Hanuman and Hari Vilas and Tamal Krishna and who else was there? It's a couple of years ago, so I'm trying to remember who else was there. What? No. No.
Where was this?
Paris.
Paris. Oh.
They were staying in a little temple in Rue Lacaz, a little tiny place. So anyway, I came in and I just joined in with them, started dancing and chanting, and they go, wow, who's this person? And I told them I'm from LA. And Tamal Krishna said, yes, I'd just been in LA. And so what happened was, when I went to Rome, I said to my parents, Tamal Krishna says, yeah, I said I was going to Rome. Tamal said, I was thinking of coming to Rome to try to start something there. So I told my parents, Tamal Krishna is thinking of coming to Rome. Why don't you leave me here, and then I'll fly back from here. That way I didn't have to go through Amsterdam. And it was interesting how this was arranged. My parents said, well, why don't you go to Paris, and that way you can come with him instead of just waiting for him here, right? And they said, but if you go there now, you have to stay for at least 2 months. You can't say in 1 week I want to come back, right? It was either 2 or 3 months. If you're really going to do that, you have to commit to like 2 or 3 months, which was good in my family. I learned making commitment, not that you say you'll do something and then next week change your mind, think about it carefully. So I said, all right, I'll go to Paris. So I got to Paris, and I stayed there many months. We do Sankirtan all over, and then Tamal Krishna was called to go to India with Srila Prabhupada. And then the winter came. Now in Laguna, it never gets, Laguna varies between about 20 and 30 degrees Celsius, right? We don't really get hot or cold. Your heating and cooling there means you open the window and shut it. That's what you do to heat and cool. So it's colder and hotter here. So when it got to winter, and we had no heat or no electricity. I said, Krishna, I'll make you a deal. If you get me out of this cold, I promise I'll never complain about heat ever. Remember, be careful what you pray for, you might get it. So 3 days later, a letter came from Prabhupada that said, please send 3 devotees to India. So I got on a plane, it was snowing. This was March of '71. And when I got off, it was already 35 degrees here by the end of March. But I promised that I wouldn't complain about heat, so I didn't. And my one devotee friend says, I got to do something right away. I got to get my long underwear off, because we'd had those underneath the dhoti because it was so cold. But when it's 35 degrees Celsius, you don't need long underwear. You die from that. So we got to Delhi and we took the train. And the Indian people had seen brahmacharis and they'd seen Westerners, but they hadn't seen Western brahmacharis. So we'd sit right in the window and we'd go through Rajasthan and people would walk by the train and they'd go, because they'd realize what they'd seen. There's 3 Western brahmacharis sitting in the train window. They'd all come running over to the train and we'd preach to all these people about Krishna. So what had happened was I was about to be initiated before I left, and we'd already sent my beads to Prabhupada to be chanted on. So when I got to Mumbai, it was during the Cross Maidan festival was going on. So they said it's like in a couple days there's going to be initiation. You can be in the initiation there even though your beads have already been chanted on. So I'm wondering, wow, will my beads be chanted on twice? Because he was going to send the beads to me, but now there's going to be a initiation. So the Cross Maidan, if anybody knows Mumbai, it's at the corner of Veer Nariman Road and Mahatma Gandhi Road. If you're on Marine Drive, you just take Veer Nariman and go to where the financial district is, a big, huge field. So Prabhupada was giving class in the morning and the evening there. And this day, because there was going to be initiation and a wedding, many thousands of people came. There was 35,000 people there that night. There was Lokanath Swami came to see it. And, well, Prabhupada, the other ones initiated, Vrindavan, Mahamsa, Vardhan. Vardhan turned out was a plant from the Indian government as a spy to see what we were doing. And then there was Padmavati, Darsha, Dravida, who became Pancha Dravida later, and myself. And was interesting, just before I was going to have my beads chanted on, Prabhupada said to Guru Das, go get that Western yogi back there. And look, I'm looking, and Guru Das says, where? I don't see it. It's a big crowd. And all of a sudden, the crowd parted, and there was one with big matted hair. Prabhupada said, that one. I thought that's funny because he was pointing, Prabhupada was pointing there before the person even showed up, right? So Prabhupada said to Guru Das, go get that person. And he told him, Prabhupada told him, sit right here. And then Prabhupada chanted on my beads, and I'm thinking, wow, I had my beads chanted on twice. That person became Radhanath Swami later. So until Prabhupada pointed out that that he'd be one of us, you could see that. But it's funny because he was pointing into the crowd before he even showed up. It'd be like if you were pointing to, say hello to Shruti at 10 minutes to 5, right? And I'm not even here till 5, right? You're pointing it as if. So we all had a big rip-roaring kirtan after that. I'm thinking this is wonderful. That Prabhupada had chanted on my beads twice and gave me the name Shruti Das, which it's hard for people to pronounce because in Sanskrit it's Kshudi, in English they say Shudi, and in Bengali they say Kudi. And some people say it with a R or a T or a Suti, so many things, but it's actually Kshudi, like Ksha, Ksha. You can't even actually write it in English, so people say, you have to learn Hindi first and then you can spell it. So I was happy to get the name from Srila Prabhupada. And we had so many good times with Srila Prabhupada at the Akash. It's son of Krishna and Mitravinda, but it's son of Krishna and Mitravinda. All those names that I gave in that initiation were from the genealogical table of Krishna's family in the Krishna book. And so it also means hungry. So we had many wonderful programs with Prabhupada the Akash Ganga building. This was before we had Juhu or Chowpatty or any of these other places. And remember once we went to one Mr. Shetty's house, and Prabhupada said that she won a worldwide vegetarian cooking contest. And Prabhupada said, so they are the International Society for Eating Consciousness. He says, I must take them home or they will want to eat again. And I remember as Prabhupada looked at the food as if to offer it before it came out. And so we'd go on these engagements with Prabhupada where Prabhupada would chant and they would try to make life members, and we would eat things cooked in ghee. But I was still a young boy, so I could eat as much as I wanted. And it's funny because I'd go to places and they'd stack up big stacks of stuff and 7 puris, and someone told me, you know why they're doing that? I said, no, why? I said, because the Indian brahmachari is saying, oh, he wants 7 puris. Oh, he wants 3 scoops of halva. Oh, he wants this. So they play the tricks on me in Hindi and ask for that. I'd get this big mound of stuff, and they're all laughing, right? So the one time we went, Prabhupada hadn't been feeling as well. And we went to the biggest movie producer at the time, J. Om Prakash. We went to his house, and he ruined the Indian movies for me, because he said, I'll tell you the truth, Indian movies are silly, because they'll be about ready to kill each other. I'll kill you. No, I'll kill you first. I said, but let's have a dance. And they all come out with the pom-poms and they're having a dance, and then they stop the dance and go back to killing each other. And to Americans, this doesn't make much sense. It didn't make sense to him either, but he said that's what they want. So I thought, well, if you're the Acharya of Indian movies and you think they're silly, I guess I won't. I guess that's why so many of the Indian ones are going to America to be in TV shows there, huh? So many of the big Indian movie stars, Rajesh Khanna and Devanand, and the Kapoor brothers, I think there's 4 of them, all became life members that night. And from them, so many other people became. But Prabhupada was influencing so many people in the town. It's hard with trumpets going off. Influencing so many people in Mumbai. But we used to get to go on walks with Srila Prabhupada. I remember the one time we went to the Hanging Gardens, which is near the Chowpatty temple, and as we were walking around, these 2 impersonal swamis came up and they said, would you like to come to our ashram? We said, well, Prabhupada, if you want to go, we'll go. And Prabhupada said, not like that. He said, if we all want to go, we'll go. Otherwise, don't just ask me. We said, fine, let's go. So we went there, and I'm an American, but I'd been in France before I came. And this had to be, I came from France in March of 71, and this had to be more like September, like 6 months later. Prabhupada had already gone away and come back and to India. So we sat down with these impersonalist swamis, and Prabhupada was talking to them in Hindi, saying Ishi Prakar and certain other things. I know that means similarly. And they had on the wall, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. And it's funny because Prabhupada said later they're impersonalists, but they have Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. But Prabhupada just turned to me about this close away, and he said, we were both sitting on the floor next to each other. And he said, you just came from France, didn't you? I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. And then he went on to say, devotees come from France and America and so many places. And I'm thinking, here he is, the Jagat Guru, the spiritual master of the universe. But he was in an older dhoti, and he had his hands up like this, and he was just sitting with his disciples on the floor, preaching to these impersonalist swamis. His business was just preaching and giving Krishna to people. He wasn't concerned. And he wasn't concerned that he was almost 80 and I was almost 18. That is just a kid, right? I have a grandchild that's older than I was then, and Prabhupada was 20 years older than me that I am now, right? But still, they asked us that. And a similar thing happened when it was during the war, and sometimes bombs would come, and we picked up newspapers to see what had been bombed or what was happening, and I'm looking at one, and Srila Prabhupada's looking at another, and then Srila Prabhupada says, can we trade newspapers? I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada, he says, no, he says, when you are finished. I thought, wow. And then that's when the, so then, speaking of being bombed, this was, in June what happened was that I was able to get my Gayatri initiation, June 19th, 1971. And so Prabhupada was going to go to Russia, so he was going to chant on the threads and then just give them to me, and not Jananivas in Mayapur, but Jaganivas, a different person. He was going to just give us the threads, chant on, and I thought, wow, that's... So then Tamal Krishna said to Prabhupada, Prabhupada, you can't go to Russia now. The mangoes had just arrived, the first ones. And because the mango scene is just beginning. And Prabhupada said, preaching in the snows of Russia is sweeter than the sweetest mango. So when it came time, then Prabhupada decided he was going to do a ceremony. And I thought, wow, I got the beads chanted on twice. Now I'm going to get double with the thread too. He chanted on the thread, and he chanted on my thread already, but not Jaganivas's. So now I'm going to get the thread chanted on, and he'll put it on my neck. So as he's coming towards me behind that, he stops about this close away, and he goes over to Jaganivas with his thread. And Brahmananda says, Prabhupada, no, that's supposed to be Shrudi's thread. I said, I know what Prabhupada's doing, I'll tell you later. I knew he was going to give him the double mercy because I'd already had it, right? So then I got the Gayatri initiation, and the next time there was a fire sacrifice, I remember I was fanning Srila Prabhupada, and then I'm trying to chant, and a woman says, oh, let me fan and you chant. And Prabhupada said, why he stopped fanning? He said, well, he's chanting Mala. He said that he was fanning nicely. He said, stop chanting and keep fanning, right? So Prabhupada did tell me to stop chanting, but only on the occasion to fan the spiritual master. So, so speaking of the war going on, I used to get to do the artik after, because I got the Gayatri initiation. I had lots of times with Prabhupada alone, because first in the morning, because we couldn't be real loud, we were in the 7th story of the Akash Ganga, so we do a quiet artik, so most of the time other people didn't wake up. So I'd go and I'd make the offering, and I'd hear Prabhupada in the next room translating the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam on the dictaphone. When I'd go to bed at 10:30, he was still awake, and when I woke up at 3:30, he was awake. He must have slept somewhere in the middle, but I'm not sure when, but so I would hear him translating that, and then I would offer the articles, and when I got to just in the middle of the flower, the door would crack. I could still hear the door crack, and Srila Prabhupada comes out, and when it's time to give the flower, I would just hand the flower directly to Prabhupada. I'd say, wow, it's just Prabhupada, myself, and Radha and Krishna. Those are Radha Ras Bihari deities, the ones in Mumbai. And I just hand the flower directly to Srila Prabhupada, and he would go back into his room and keep translating. But he came out the door, crack. I'd always listen for that, crack. Just quiet, just crack. Not a real loud sound, but just a little crack. And then see Srila Prabhupada walking towards me. And I remember that just like it's ever fresh. And then I'd hand him the flower, right? So that was first thing in the morning. And then at lunchtime, what I would do is I would go into Srila Prabhupada's room, and he'd say, can you move that big Sanskrit volume of Srimad Bhagavatam commentaries by Jiva Goswami? And there was a lot of commentaries because this book was heavy, so I put, maybe like this. Okay, it was big, it was a big book, okay. Yeah, it was a big book. It was heavy to lift. So then I would give Srila Prabhupada his prasadam. Then I would go out, I'd serve the other devotees their prasadam. Then I'd come back and get Prabhupada's plate. I would clean Prabhupada's plate, and then I'd eat what he left behind as my lunch. And I did that for a couple months. My lunch was what Srila Prabhupada left over. So I got to serve the devotees, I got to serve Srila Prabhupada, I got to move the Sanskrit commentaries on Bhagavatam by Jiva Goswami. And I remember when I'm in the room with Prabhupada, I felt like they say being in a fish bowl, nothing you do is a secret, right? Like the fish can't have secrets in a little bowl. Everybody watches them. I felt like, there's no secrets from Prabhupada. He can just see right through me. So the one time, I'm doing the artik. Oh, because what I used to do is after the artik, I'd go in the room, and this was the third time I'd be with Prabhupada. I'd give Prabhupada the flower, and I'd put the water on Srila Prabhupada's head from the artik, and then after it was over, and then I'd go do it to the other. So this one artik was a little upsetting because as I'm doing the artik, we would hear the air raid sirens go. They go wah, not wah, but just wah, and then you're not bombing planes are coming, right? So here the wah, and then the Pakistani planes were close, and they were dropping bombs in the ocean. Boom, 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 and I'm going Jayo, Jaya, boom, going boom, John Day. I'm thinking, whoa, this is not very comfortable, right? So I would still go in and put the water on Srila Prabhupada's head. So the next night, I went into Srila Prabhupada's room, and I was in anxiety. There's something about bombs being dropped close to you that kind of takes you out of your comfort zone. I don't know if it's ever happened to any of you, but you don't get used to it. So I went into Srila Prabhupada's room, and I was in big anxiety. And I put the water on Prabhupada's head and gave Prabhupada the flower, and I paid my obeisances, and I started to leave. And then Prabhupada, Yadubara and Vishaka were there, and Tamal Krishna was there, and Prabhupada says, just a minute. And he looks up at me, and I can still see his eyes glaring at me. And he said, so everything is all right? And a couple seconds before, it wasn't all right. I was thinking about bombs, right? And all of a sudden, that anxiety was, where'd it go? It was just here a minute ago. That anxiety lifted, and I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada, everything is all right. And the next day, my mother called from America and said, I read in the newspaper that Mumbai had been bombed by Pakistani planes. Are you okay there? I said, yes, I'm fine here with Srila Prabhupada. So what was funny is our next door neighbors from there, during all this, somehow they showed up at the Bombay temple and they brought me a watch for my parents. And they said, well, we wanted to come see the temple and come see you. And it was kind of interesting how they showed up. Even during the war, when it was hard to get in and out, they somehow got there, right? So that was Bob and Louise Turner. So they'd be remembered to coming to see Prabhupada at the temple and bringing me a watch there and seeing the deities. That was interesting that they had that kind of, people who are at least interested in seeking things, and aren't afraid of something new. They'll get a chance. And Bob and Louise Turner, of course, gone now, but I'm sure they benefit by coming to see Prabhupada and Radha and Krishna and doing that all during a war going on, right? So that anxiety was lifted. So I remember then after the war, we were taking a walk with Srila Prabhupada, and Yahya Khan, the leader of Pakistan, had kept telling his people, we're winning, until he wasn't. And then all of a sudden, they were lost. So Prabhupada's walking. All of a sudden, he stops. He says, what has become of Yahya Khan? He says, I think they have killed him. So it was funny how the Prabhupada was up on the current events with what was happening and what was going on. I told about J. Om Prakash's house. It was amazing too. The one time, remember, I heard music and the door opened and Srila Prabhupada was playing on the harmonium and singing with such an intent look on his face of devotion. It was like, wow, he's singing, playing the harmonium. It was such an intense experience to watch him play the harmonium. One time someone was talking on the phone in the office and Prabhupada was right behind me on the phone. I was making garlands or something. Because we didn't have many ladies there to do that. Guru Kripa was there, and Madhavisa was there, and a few others. But it was ecstatic to go on walks with Srila Prabhupada. The one time, the Prabhupada went out, and the doorbell rang, and we opened the door and flew the flowers, and the milk van had showed up, and wondered why we were throwing flowers at him. But we had a lot of association with Prabhupada at this flat on the ISKCON building. There was like 3 or 4 bedrooms in it and a big living room we used as a temple. And this was before we had the Juhu temple. And then the one time, Prabhupada had gone to Nairobi. And he was coming back from Nairobi, but I guess Shyamasundar Sundar had lost his shot card because India is very worried about yellow fever. So we were waiting for Srila Prabhupada to come through, and because he didn't have the shot card. So if you're coming from Nairobi, you have a shot card, or if you have a note from the doctor that says that you're not allowed to take that. I'm not allowed to take it because it's a form of hepatitis and I have another form, so I'm not allowed. So I have the note, but they looked that all over, talked that with their superiors and everything else. But if you don't have one of those, they put you in the quarantine hospital in Andheri. So Prabhupada didn't come out, he went to the quarantine hospital in Andheri. So what I did is, well, we know what I'll do is we'll just stay the night in the parking lot and we'll go in the morning. And Prabhupada had the Mangal Artik with a couple of his servants there, and he'd have the Mangal Artik with with Prabhupada. And then there was like these 4 big ping pong tables in a row. And so Srila Prabhupada would walk around these tables chanting. So I'd walk around the other way. And so they're like this. Say, here's all the 4 ping pong tables here. When Prabhupada got to here, and I'd get to here, I'd look at Prabhupada. And then when I got to here and Prabhupada was there, I'd also look across at Prabhupada. So each side I'd look at him and he'd look at me. I did this every day for about 4 days. Finally, after a couple of days, one boy lived in Andheri who'd come to the temple. A bunch of these kids come. This kid was more like my age, but there was 3 other kids that would come they were 11 when I was 18, and they would come every day. And when they heard I was leaving for Africa, boy, they all cried. But this boy went, stayed at his house near there and went to see Srila Prabhupada. And during this time, he was doing the dialectic spiritualism, all the different philosophers. Prabhupada liked Socrates. He was talking about Aristotle, Socrates, and there's a whole book with many of the different philosophers, but particularly we were talking about Socrates and Aristotle during the time that I was there. So then what happened was we were getting ready. Prabhupada would go to places and he'd get it done, right away. So it was, Rishi Kumar Swami said that he wanted to go to South Africa, and he asked Srila Prabhupada if I could go too, and Srila Prabhupada says, yes, he should go also. And I said, wow, why should I go? And I said, well, why should I not? I said, why me? Well, why not me, right? So I said, all right, I'll go. So what happened then is that Prabhupada went to I guess, Jaipur, and Tamal Krishna Swami took sannyas there. His wife was named Madri. I guess he said, so he was afraid to try to have children because his wife was Madri. I remember Pandu. When he had sexual relations with his wife, he died. So Tamal Krishna said, that's an omen. I don't think I should try to have children. So anyway, he took sannyas then, and then we were going to have this big festival in Mayapur. So Rishi Kumar Swami and I took the 3rd-class train. It cost us 50 rupees to go from Mumbai to Calcutta, 3 days. It was a wooden bench. They didn't even have that class anymore. I don't think even the cattle ride in that one. But it was a wooden benches, 3rd class, and we'd sleep on that, but no padding, no nothing. So we got to Calcutta, and I got really sick with jaundice there. And then we went out to Mayapur. When I got to Mayapur, there was just one little thatched hut there, and there was Jayapataka Swami and Achujananda Swami. And I walked up to Bhaktisiddhanta's temple, and one of Prabhupada's godbrothers said to me, he said, so how are Jayapataka Swami and Achujananda Swami? I said, they're good. He said, see, I know your devotees, all of them. I said, well, we're going to get many more. It'll be difficult to count them later on. Try and count them now, right? So then he said, your Swamiji should not have gone to the West without the permission of this mat. So I thought, oh, now I have to defend my spiritual master, but do it in such a way that I don't offend his godbrother. So I thought carefully, and I said, oh, who started this mat? He says, my spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada. I said, oh, so he and the mat are non-different? He says, yes, but why? He could see I had some trick. I says, because if he and the mat are non-different, and he asked my spiritual master to go to the West, then my spiritual master already has the permission. I said, thank you so much for helping me clear this up. And he just went, Jai. Because the idea is we have to try to get to the truth. It's not that we don't say anything, but we talk on a matter of principle. Even if I have to give him 40%, even 60% of the credit. The idea is to get to the truth without having to do it in a way that's offensive. To get to the point, to argue the principles of it. That, like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, when I give a class about this, I said, no, not everybody has to learn these austerities. Only the people who speak to other people, need to know those. You know what the austerities of speech are? Who can name one? You don't need to know these unless you speak to other people. What are the austerities of speech? Truth, that's one. What's another one? Someone else. What? Which is? Truth, what else?
That should be palatable.
Palatable, okay, that's two. What else? Someone else. You're going to have to go back and study these because next time I ask these, I want everyone to know them. So we got palatable and we got truthful. What else?
Purely?
Nice to hear.
Yes, pleasing. Pleasing. That's 3 of them. What else? What else? Begins with a B? Beneficial. And it should be based on what? Scriptures, spiritual knowledge. So it should be truthful, it should be beneficial, it should be pleasing, it should be palatable, it should be based on spiritual knowledge. So if we're going to open our mouth, we think, okay, how can I come out this way? How can it be pleasing? I do have to correct him on what he said about Prabhupada, but I can do it in a way that's palatable, beneficial, pleasing, and based on spiritual knowledge. So we should think about this, and I know Krishna spoke those for important because we see, I gave a talk like this at a peace conference in Nairobi, and one African politician said, I know a bunch of people that need to learn those austerities of speech. So we should know these, because if we practice that when we're speaking, we'll get the things across in a way that's, Krishna didn't speak these just because he had nothing else to do. These are meant for us to use. So I used it in that way, and he just went jai. So then Prabhupada arrived with Bhaktivaibhava Puri Maharaj. He'd been at his temple in Vishakhapatnam and Madras, and then there was a few more devotees there, because before it was just myself and Jayapataka Swami and Achutananda Swami, and then the 50 devotees showed up. And Prabhupada stayed in the hut with his godbrother Bhaktivaibhava Puri Maharaj, and we put up a big tent, and we put out a stage. And then on Lord Chaitanya's appearance day, think of the brilliant way Prabhupada did this, back to the austerity of speech. And it goes with this. So Prabhupada invited all of his godbrothers to come, and they laid the cornerstone for the Mayapur temple, the first one, the Chandradoya Mandir, not the temple of Vedic Planetarium. And the Prabhupada went in to put the dirt in, down the stairs, went down the rickety little stairs, bamboo stairs, to go down in the hole and put dirt. And then Prabhupada's godbrothers went, and then the sannyasis went, and then I got to go. So then Prabhupada had all of his godbrothers on the stage. There's photos of this, even a painting. And think of the brilliant way Prabhupada did this. He says, now that we're all together, he said, instead of continuing to work as individual movements, from today forward, we will do like our spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, wanted. We'll form a governing body commission, and from today forward, we will all work as one movement instead of separate movements. And they went jai, but they never quite came together. But that's why you can't think that, he didn't have to say, do you think, or maybe, but he didn't have to insult them either, but he just brought the point out straightforward. From today forward, this is what we should do. Now you think, oh, maybe they won't do it or whatever, but you have to try. So Srila Prabhupada tried. And he just did it like assuming, from today forward, we'll do this. Why not? What is the reason not? Then some people said to him, oh, but you'll become more prominent. And Prabhupada said, no, a governing body is not like that. It's funny because then they'd say that, well, we're older devotees than you, but then they'd say, oh, but you'd become more prominent. You can't get both, right? Either they're the older devotees or he's more prominent, but you can't argue both. It doesn't make any sense. But a governing body's not like that. It means they all get their vote. Now, of course, people may have liked his voice, but he was willing to put everything he had together with what they had, even though he was ahead. He was willing to put a lot more than any did to come to America to help him. He went and put this all together and then said, now let's just work together, right? You see how much he was willing to give up for that spirit of cooperation, to just move forward. And he put a lot of work into bringing all those people together. He got to Mayapur, it wasn't years later, that cornerstone was laid within days. And that plan was being made, and he planned to include all of his godbrothers to work together. So he said, at least we should have a governing body, and we can work as one movement, because we see how unfortunate it was when they didn't. At the time, they had more people at the Gaudiya Math temple at the Yoga Pith than we do. Now I think they even have less than they did then, and they certainly have less than than we have. It's almost hard to count because there's about 800 brahmacharis. There's maybe 2,500 householders that live there. There's another 3,000 people that work there, and some of those people are also part of the household community. So and then you have guests that come to stay and guests that come to visit, right? So, you have so many categories of people: householders, brahmacharis, workers of so many sorts, and people who are staying the night and people who are just coming for part of the day. So then I was on my way to Africa to open the temple with Rishi Kumar Swami. So I went into Srila Prabhupada's room and I said, Srila Prabhupada, I'm on my way to Africa to open a temple now, and I hope this gives me an opportunity to increase my service to you. And Srila Prabhupada went into his room, and the Yogapeeta's back that direction. He just put his hands behind his head and he said, service to Lord Chaitanya, service to Lord Chaitanya, service to Lord Chaitanya, as if offering my service to Lord Chaitanya, my little bit of service. And that's why it makes me realize that, if we can each do a little something. I don't want to be, I may not be the big Hanuman that's throwing the boulders in the water and he's telling the squirrel, get out of the way. I may be the squirrel that's kicking the dust in the water, but if I'm just a squirrel who can kick dust, then I should be careful to kick the dust into the water where it does some good, instead of kicking dirt all over myself and everybody else, right? So we should be careful in this, not to kick the dirt all over ourselves and everyone else. Kick the dirt in the spot that it actually does some good, where it's pleasing and beneficial and palatable. So I was on my way to Africa, and I went to visit my mother in Switzerland first, and then went to Nairobi with Brahmananda Swami was there. And there's a new temple built there, but it's on the same location. And we sent our passports to South Africa saying we wanted to open up a Krishna conscious temple, and they refused us. So we sent them to London to get a tourist visa. And so we got tourist visas, and we snuck into South Africa as tourists to start a temple. So we started doing preaching programs there. And you hear Prabhupada talks about it in the Nectar of Devotion Tape 1. He talks about, he uses the Bengali pronunciation of the name Kudidas. He says Riju Kumar and Kudidas Brahmachari are in South Africa as preaching Krishna consciousness in South Africa, because we'd done some programs there, and it was in the Indian newspaper there. But it was tricky there because apartheid meant that it wasn't really legal for us to mix with Indians or Indians to mix with us or to mix with Africans, and yet we were trying to preach to the whole country. And so we ordered books in South Africa, and we did some preaching. My parents came to visit in December, and they bought us a car, and we met with many of the Indian people. It was interesting how they came there and met with the Indian people, and when the Indian people came pick my parents up at the airport, when we got to the hotel, the people at the hotel said to my parents, where are those people going? They said, well, they're with us. They said, well, Indians can't come in a white hotel. So my father went and looked around the back, and he saw there was a service entrance near the suite. He says, well, can we rent that suite in the back? So he told them, just take the bags up the stairs like you're working here and just come in. We don't care about apartheid. It's not our law. So they left us a car there, and they brought us incense sticks from L.A., and my father was putting the foot under the scale because it weighed so much, the sticks to make incense out of. He brought them from L.A., just the sticks, and then we would make them but they got them from the L.A. temple, from the spiritual sky, and you have to put his foot under the scale so it looked like it didn't weigh as much. So they brought us that to make, but then when my parents went back, pretty quick after that, I couldn't find Rishi Kumar anywhere. Then I found a Sika. I thought that's kind of strange. And the Dunda was in the closet. Then I found a note. It said, Dear Shudi, decided to split. And I'm thinking, wow, Rupa Goswami says we confidentially reveal our mind, but it's got to be more than this. So I turned the paper over, nothing on the other side. I looked for another sheet. I'm thinking, we're in a country that we're 2 miles from any neighbors and 2,000 miles from any devotees, and he leaves me a note, decided to split. And I'm thinking, wow, and the car my parents left wasn't there. Fortunately, somebody brought it to me a couple days later, but he'd taken the money and he'd left, so I thought, well, I don't want to make him look too bad, but I'll just write a letter to Prabhupada and just explain exactly what happened, right? So I had to write to him. I said, you know, he left me here alone with just a note that said decided to split. And he took money he had we'd collected with him. And I owe $10,000 to the book fund, but if I order like $2,500 more worth of Gitas, I can tell people they can't have the Gita unless they buy the whole set of books. And I think this doesn't sound good. I'm already $10,000 in debt and I'm asking for more credit. I said, but this, you know, I got to do it. I would have asked the other devotees if there were devotees there. I would have even asked neighbors if I had any, but there was no one to ask, so I just had to come up with decisions. I wrote that I would make more incense sticks, and I would sell them at the programs, and I would concentrate on selling books so that I could pay off this debt, because I never knew when the government would throw me out. They came to us earlier in Johannesburg when we reapplied for the visa, when my parents were there, and these 4 big tall guys, about 2 meters tall each, came and took us upstairs. And they said, you think you can fly, don't you? They said, we think you're going to jump out the window and try to fly. So I go over and wave. He said, why are you waving? I said, my mother's down below. She's an attorney from Los Angeles, and she's waving back. So they gave up on their plan to throw me out the window. But when I wrote to Srila Prabhupada that I was there alone, I sent copies. In those days, we'd have to make like a carbon copy. I put like letters, 1 to Brahmananda in Nairobi and 1 to Karandar in LA, and I sent them the copies. And the letter from Prabhupada came back the quickest. And I thought, wow. And I found out later, Shami Shinder said he used to open up all the letters. And he went to Prabhupada and said, Srila Prabhupada, he said, there's a letter from Shuddhidas that Rishi Kumar left him alone in South Africa and took all the money with him. And Prabhupada's eyes got big and said, oh. He said, then we'll immediately dictate a letter, you immediately type it up, and immediately take it to the post office and deal with the other letters later. So my letter came back quickly. And I thought, maybe I'm in trouble for making all these decisions. So I still remember how I felt when I opened up the top of the letter. I opened up the top of the letter, and the first line said, I'm very much pleased at the responsibility you've taken to spread Krishna consciousness in South Africa at such a young age. I said, well, the rest has to be good after that. If the letter starts with, I'm very much pleased at the responsibility you've taken to spread Krishna consciousness in South Africa, then it had to be good. And he said that somehow or other I was left alone, just like Narada Muni. And Narada Muni became the greatest devotee. He said, that Rishi Kumar was tempted by Maya, and somehow he fell. Then he said that I'm praying to Krishna that you will have the strength and enthusiasm to carry out this mission. He said, follow the regulative principles and chant your 16 rounds. This will keep your consciousness pure and eager to engage in devotional service. And the next letter from Prabhupada came with a receipt for $700. I'd heard from Shami Shinder and the others that then Rishi Kumar showed up in Bombay after my letter came, right? And Prabhupada said, you left that young boy all alone there and took the money? He said, you give me what money you have. So I got it. Prabhupada got $700 from him and credited it to my book bill. When I wrote Prabhupada, I didn't say, please collect the money from Rishi Kumar somehow, but that's what he did. He got money from him and credited it to my book bill. I got a receipt that took my book bill down $700. That was, that was certainly a wonderful occurrence. As I said before, my mother had experience with Prabhupada because she was an attorney and she'd helped out the Laguna Beach devotees when they had trouble. And so Prabhupada had told Karandar in LA that he wanted to have an attorney write the book trust. He said, well, Shuddhidas's mother is a trust attorney in Laguna Beach and she helps the devotees there. So Prabhupada wrote some things that he wanted, and my mother wrote a draft, and Prabhupada wrote some notes on it, questions. He said, well, why don't I come up with my secretary? So she came with her secretary, and Karandar and Prabhupada met, and they spoke for a couple hours on setting up the book trust. And that's why it's funny today when some people come to me and say, well, don't you think we should close the book trust? Or I said, what part of irrevocable don't you understand? My mother had been a trust attorney for 27 years. That was her And sometimes people do write revocable trusts if they plan to change it, but irrevocable means irrevocable. So that's why they write them that way. So obviously, if you think it should be closed, it doesn't really matter because it's already in writing in another way. That's why they do that. Sometimes people make their own trust that's revocable so they can change it later, put people differently and change percentages. But my mother said he was very clear, more than any other clients, on exactly what he wanted, and she understood why she was setting up a trust and not a corporation. With the corporation, with the trust, the trustees are liable. With the corporation, they're not. And with the trust, it can be passed on. There's so many advantages to a trust. And he understood exactly what she'd done, and he knew exactly what he wanted. And she said more than any other clients, and her clients own cities, like one city called Placentia, or the Emerald Bay Community Association, a community association, about 1,000 homes right on the beach of all ultra-rich people. I mean, these are sophisticated people. She wasn't handling drunk driving. She was handling trusts for people who had money and had good sense. But yet Prabhupada had more than they did. So when my mother came to Mumbai, she, it was funny, I asked her, she came to Mumbai to visit the temple there, and then that was the first time I came to Vrindavan. She says, let's go to Vrindavan. So in August of 71, we flew in the old French caravels, and they'd come from Mumbai to Delhi, and because it was monsoon, they'd just go straight down to get through the clouds and land. And we came to Vrindavan and went to Radha Damodar temple. We didn't come to this temple because it wasn't here for years later. So I asked my mother, did you ask Prabhupada if you knew who your son was? He goes, yes. And Prabhupada says, yes, he's the young brahmachari in Bombay. Because I was 18, but I looked about 13. When I first got to Bombay, Prabhupada said to Shaimachandra and to Brahmananda, that you must take care of him. He's a young boy. That's why Brahmananda and Shaimachandra always fix my buttons. And, because we were so young during this time that someone said, did you hear what happened to Tamal Krishna? I said, no. I said, he turned 24. I'm like 18. I go, wow, 24. And Shaimachandra says, that's nothing. I'm 29. I go, whoa, I'm 29. That's like, wow. So that's how young it was. I looked so young. Prabhupada said that he's a young boy. You have to take care of him. And that's why you saw when Brahmananda was around, or Shaimachandra, make sure my buttons are right and make sure, because, you don't forget how you remember somebody. And I looked so young at the time that they all took care of me. And to see how Prabhupada took care of us like that, my mother said that Prabhupada was very cordial with her and sat her down and made her feel very comfortable. And at the same time, he understood exactly what she was trying to do with the book trust. But especially when I was alone in South Africa, Prabhupada asked Brahmananda to come, and Brahmananda said, Prabhupada has asked me to come help you because you're there alone. So then he wrote me that he was leaving Nairobi. Then he wrote me from Mombasa, he was leaving there. Then from Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, then Malawi. And then he said they turned him back at the border because he brought African devotees with him. So next, Prabhupada asked one boy, Dur Darshan. Dur Darshan means hard to see. So he was there about a month, and then he was Dur Darshan, hard to see, hard to find. And I was alone again. So then Prabhupada had asked Pushta Krishna Swami to come and do the preaching there. So I knew that he was coming, and I was doing lots of books because I wanted to pay off this debt. And I went to these cities outside of Durban, and the security police had found out where I was staying, but not till I'd come back and sold a bunch of books. And so, because Pushta Krishna Swami had already planned to come, when they caught up with me, I called him up and told him he has to come the next day. Because I hid my visa and told him it was coming on a Monday, and this was a Friday, so I knew I only had a couple days. I told him, it's Friday, you got to be here tomorrow, Saturday. And so he showed up the next day with an assistant, and that was all because Prabhupada was trying to make sure I wasn't there alone. He sent Dur Darshan, he sent Brahmananda, and then Pushta Krishna. And because of that, today South Africa's a big preaching effort, because if I'd left there, or if Prabhupada hadn't been concerned about me being there, nobody wanted to go there with a debt. Fortunately, I paid off the debt and left him a car and left him like $5,000 worth of books already paid for. by Prabhupada's mercy, because he was praying to Krishna that I would have the strength and enthusiasm to carry it out. And he collected $700 of it. And the rand went from being worth $1.20 to $1.50. Now it's about 7 cents or something. Is that right? What is it? Yeah. So now it takes 15 rand to the dollar. So it was like 22 times as much. So I could sell a 25 rand set of books, and it was the equivalent of $37.50, which would be how many rupees? A lot, huh? Yeah, back then the rand was worth about 100 rupees. So 25 rand was like 2,500 rupee sets of books, right? Which wouldn't be bad, right? If you could sell 2,500 rupee sets. If you sold a few of those in a day, you did okay, didn't you? And this was in the 70s. So we'll end there. Other people were supposed to speak, but they're not here, right? Other people were supposed to speak, but they're not here. I wasn't responsible for that.
ISKCON was supposed to come, but I don't know what happened. I mean, it's his day also.
Yeah, Thursday. Yes.
Well, you still have something else?
Well, that's about time there, isn't it? Somebody have any questions or comments on it? Any questions about any of those places? What it was like to be in Mumbai or South Africa? You know, I take solace in it at times because it's like, you know, some people have big families and travel with a whole group, and I seem to travel alone because my timing is you know, what was neat was you know, my mother had that association with Prabhupada. And, you know, people say they want to die fast, but there's something to dying slow. That in March of 2009, my mother slipped and got injuries because she was on blood thinners. The blood kept bleeding and it went in her lung and caused a stroke. She was in the hospital already for days, had a stroke there. But she stayed in the hospital a few months, and when she came home, I would read a little bit of Gita and a chapter of Krishna book to her every day. And as it got towards the end, she was trying to chant. Even when she would say sentences, and some of it would come out wrong, and then the words, and then she was very difficult to talk, but then she was trying to chant. She was going, I-did-did-did-did-did-did-did. She was trying to chant, even though she'd never chanted before. And what was amazing is I read the Krishna book stories to her, and because she was a little delirious after the second stroke she had, they sent someone from a chaplain from the hospice group, and my mother said, "Are you an attorney?" Because I'd read to her the story about the devastating rainfall in Vrindavan. And the woman says, "No, why?" She goes, "Well, because I need an attorney to go to the courthouse and file a claim against Indra to cease and desist with the rain. And then I need to file a property damage claim against Indra on behalf of the residents of Vrindavan." Prabhupada told my mother she was a Kshatriya because she fought for Krishna. So she was thinking that she had to file a property damage claim and a cease and desist order against Indra to cease and desist with the rain. It was funny how she was so sure I need an attorney to go to the courthouse and file order against Indra to cease and desist with the rain. So what was funny is because she was still working, doing everything. She practiced law 64 years. And when she slipped and fell and got injuries, she wasn't even able to sit up on her own. She had to be lifted up and done everything with. After the second stroke, she had to be on a feeding tube. So the one day the caregiver looks in the corner. She goes, "Look, someone's here." And my mother's talking. She goes, "Who are you talking to?" My mother said, "Prabhupada's here." She said, "Prabhupada, save me." But even the caregiver, you could see like just kind of like a cloud in the corner of the room, right? My mother said, "Prabhupada's here. Prabhupada, save me." So it shows that she got to do that service. And she had, if you ever get those, they have those little things where one side is Prabhupada chanting japa, and you put the switch, it's Prabhupada chanting kirtan. You put that by someone's ear when they can't do it. She'd hear Prabhupada chanting japa and the kirtan. So she was able to pass away with that. And she was able, even though, you know, she wasn't really a devotee, but she'd done service and she'd been to Vrindavan and she appreciated it because of that. And because of me reading Krishna book to her, she was trying to chant and had Prabhupada. And she was saying the end is not the end. So, you know, we can have, even with a little Krishna consciousness, we can have a glorious death. Not today, hopefully. Hare Krishna.